Hi Roger, thanks for dropping by. This video today is going to be discussing my dendrobiums that need a winter rest. And I'm going to state now that my plans and my thoughts for my winter resting dendrobiums start now at the beginning of the growing season. So why the hell am I showing a Vanda then? I just want to make a sort of admission. I don't do waterculture. Well, actually I flipping do, don't I? These Vandas get dunked in a bucket and left to soak for as long as, well, until I get round to doing the next one. And sometimes if I forget and do something else and get distracted, that can be an hour. But basically at this time of year from now on, this is going to happen every day. And they get left to soak until the roots are a deep green colour and they can take no more moisture in. And just, how many have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 7. A couple of little seedling little ones up there, but yeah. So that's how many I've got. And just to show the amount of drinking that these sort of plants can do, the level in that bucket will go down about 1 inch to 1.5 inches a day. Yeah? They drink a lot of water. So I don't think your little spray's going to hack it, quite honestly. So I do waterculture. Yeah. Okay, my schedule's not the same as some of you guys. You know, 2 days in water, 3 days out. And I'm not sure that would suit Vandas so well, but maybe it does. If they're growing well and they're blooming, don't fix what isn't broken, basically. But yeah, I do waterculture. Anyway, back to the dendrobiums. To do this, I need space. So I'm going to clear that lot off and try and find somewhere else to put it. Get the resting dendrobiums out of the bedroom. They've had enough. Their dormancy is going to get broken, whether they are in growth or not. You know, we're up to 11.5 hours now. It's growing season. It's not resting season. So I'll clear this lot off and I'll get all the ones in question down and we'll have a look at them and I'll have a chat and lay out my plans for those types of dendrobiums for a complete year. So from the start of the growing season to when it starts again the following year. It is a long-term plan. And I've made observations and I've looked at, you know, we've had dull, miserable winter. And during that time, there's not a lot to do with the orchids, specifically those that are resting, or especially those that are resting. And I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of internet research, not just on orchids, but on weather patterns and humidity levels and, you know, where these orchids come from. And these are the observations and these are the plans for the forthcoming year. Some of it is going to be a bit of an eye-opener, but that's what I'm going to do and I'll say why. I don't ever just do something because somebody says. I like to know why. That's how I am. So we'll go into it and we'll have a look at it and see what you think. I'm not telling anybody to do what I do, I'm just saying what I am going to do and why, and we'll go from there. I need some room and I need to move some things so I don't keep banging my head as well. So let's get on with it, let's get the ones up in the bedroom, back downstairs, and we'll go over them in turn. Okay, that's got them all back down again. They are in various stages of pleasing me and not. But right, weather patterns. These are all dendrobiums obviously, and they come from, in some cases, similar parts of the world and in some cases quite different parts of the world. The main difference that I want to point out is elevation, height above sea level, because it dictates temperatures. It also dictates other things. So right, let's have a think. Deciduous forests, yeah, in places where in effect you get either monsoon rains or the equivalent. So come the start of that rainy season, it persists it down virtually every day for months and months and months at a time. During that time, the deciduous forests are in full leaf. Do these plants need high light levels in their growing season? The answer is no. And depending on their elevation, do they need a lot of warmth? In some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. Now you have to bear in mind where you get monsoon rains, where you don't get the cold at lower elevations, you don't tend to get quite so many deciduous trees. They tend to be evergreen because they can put up with it. Yeah? So there's a couple of points to think about. The other thing I would like to say is a lot of the places where these come from, when you get into their resting period, certainly at the start of that resting period, the temperature drops down a bit, yeah, to a degree, 1 degree or another, but it drops. It's called winter time, and most parts of the world that have a winter, a distinct winter, temperatures are lower. Now, if you've just spent months and months and months and months raining, everything is soaking wet, soaked through to the skin, like getting caught out in a rainstorm without your Macintosh. It's soaked, the ground is soaked, the vegetation is soaked, the air is soaked. And if you're up in those levels of humidity and you drop the temperature, you get fog and mist. It's a natural process. I can do it in my grow room. Yeah? If I seal this up and put the foggers on and get this up to 100, well, let's say 90% humidity at 25 degrees. If I then drop that down 5 degrees, I will get fog. It's just what happens. That's nothing to do with orchids, that's weather. Okay, so at the start of the drier season, and I use the word drier, not dry. There is a difference. When you get no rain at all, I do believe it's called a desert. You don't tend to get orchids there. But the rains slow right down to next to nothing. But for quite a long time, everything's still soaking wet. It doesn't suddenly dry out on a date on the calendar. It takes quite a while. And I've had some very good information from somebody who lives there, who's seen it, done it, been there, got the t-shirt. It's important. And so basically what you're looking at is as they go into what we would call their dry rest period, firstly, they're not dry. The air is saturated and it's often foggy. But the rains slow down. So they're not getting watered on, but they are still wet. They're not bone dry. It's not a good idea. Then what happens? As winter progresses and you don't get much rain, quite long periods with no rain, eventually breezes come along, things happen, and that moisture level drops down. So towards the end of the resting period, it is actually quite dry. And as that moisture level lessens and lessens, the fog does start to disperse in some of these places. So we're in deciduous forest, there's no leaves on the tree and the fog's gone. Now it is bright. Yeah? The sun's out quite a lot. So we've got much higher light levels at the end of the resting period for a lot of these orchids. Now that's a pattern that I wish to adopt. Now last year, most of my dendrobiums lived up in the roof to get the most light I could give them. Deciduous forests in the rain season do not have high light levels. It's their growing season, yeah? So they get a lot of water and a lot of nutrients washed down off the trees and monkey poo and bird poo and stuff, as they say, that's where they get their nutrients from. And decaying matter from last year's leaves that dropped off the trees and all that sort of stuff. So, they're getting a higher level of food source and they're getting a lot of water, but they're not getting high light levels. They grow down in the tree, not on the flipping top in full sun. So I don't need to keep these up in the roof where that high light level is. That gives me a lot more choices of where I can actually keep them in their growing season, which, whether they like it or not, starts today because I've made my mind up. Now, it's not a calendar date, it's just that I'm fed up with worrying about them up in the bedroom, and it's growing season, so they're either going to grow well or they're going to grow, but they're going to grow one way or the other. So that's just some thoughts about the weather patterns as this type of dendrobium would actually experience in the real world. These are species. Yeah, these are not hybrids. They haven't been taken away from their natural environment. It's in their genes. It's there, whether we like it or not. So we need to get as close to that as we possibly can. Right, individually then. This is Dendrobium senile. That might be an ex-Dendrobium senile, because that is not a happy plant, but I have seen pictures of plants that look like this that have actually got bloom spikes on. This one may have been lost, and I believe it will have been lost through becoming so dehydrated, through not getting enough moisture, because there's virtually no moss under that plant. So I'm giving it a drop of water every now and again, and maybe it'll sprout out, maybe it won't. That could be lost. That'll be a shame, but things happen. Now this one, the squash grape plant, that's Jenkinsii. And this was a nice looking plant when that went into the rest period. It has dropped quite a few leaves. That is natural. It's just that because it didn't get rested the previous winter, it didn't drop any leaves, so I was getting a bit worried about it. But the worry's gone now. I bought this one down here a week or two ago, and it's starting to be watered now. You can't just suddenly drown them when they're coming out of dormancy. You've got to introduce your water gradually. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. And maybe I'll get some flower spikes on it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But a knowledgeable person said, you know, I asked at what point does this thing bloom? And the answer was when the rains kick in. In other words, when the start of the monsoon season starts. That's easy for you to say. You know, and it's basically the increase in water levels that kicks them off again, and all the new growths sprout out and the old growths bloom. Well, we'll wait and see. So it's a plant I like, so I do want to keep it. Right, this is Primulinum. This one goes in the exception basket, because yes, it does have a dry winter rest, but where it grows naturally, it doesn't actually get cold. So if anything, I would suggest this needs a warmer winter rest, and it doesn't need chilling right down. Now, this is not a strong plant, so whether this blooms or not, I don't know. But I've seen pictures on various people's videos and things that they've actually got this in bloom now, and mine isn't. But there again, they don't live in the UK, and I do. And, you know, the day lengths increase at different rates, to different extents in different parts of the world. So mine may just be a bit behind the others. But if it's going to bloom, it's going to do it on the canes that seem to have some green in them. If you look at that one there, yeah, it's got greenery in it. So have some of these over here. Whereas some of the canes are just old. I don't believe they're capable of blooming. They may have done in the past. But nonetheless, we have 2 new growths, and we have an absolute need to get this out of that pot because it's been in there far too long. And these dendrobiums, their growth pattern is virtually identical, with subtle differences, but not really. When the new growths come out, they create a new root system during that growing season. So, you know, these new growths on this plant are going to push new roots soon. It's highly likely that one will be mounted. Oh, you can go down there for now. Right, that's that one. Now, this is a Jenkinsii cross. This is a relatively new plant for me. I was iffy as to whether I was even going to bother resting it, because it's probably out of season as far as blooming is concerned anyway, because of where it probably came from. But yeah, that's actually Jenkinsii crossed with aggregatum. They are very similar plants with very similar blooms. And because this one's got a bit more moss, obviously that in its rest took quite a bit longer to dry out. So that really did get the smallest trickle of water when I did actually water it, because, you know, if I'd watered the moss, that would have stayed wet for days up in that cold room, which is not the idea. But we have no sign of new growths at the moment. Yes, we do. There's a new growth in there. So this is starting into growth. So it needs some water. And then in the not too distant future, it's going to need some feed. So that's that one. This one is the one with the funny shaped bulbous canes that swell up part way through. And it produced good canes last year. You know, good length to them. And those bulbous bits were all big and shiny and not a mark on them. Now they have desiccated to a degree, but not extensively. And that is Findlayanum. And I was hoping this one was going to bloom. But what I don't know is when it blooms. Now again, it might be one of those that the blooms will be triggered at the same sort of point as its new growth start, which it hasn't done yet. But whether it likes it or not, it's going to get its dormancy broken. It's coming back into life one way or the other. And this monster, I'll have to find somewhere to keep this, won't I? The only thing I'm going to do with this really needs remounting, but what I'm going to do is tease out a lot of that old moss, and I may reintroduce some moss in places on it, but this does effectively virtually replace its whole root system each year. So these are last year's old roots now, you know, that have shriveled up a bit in its rest period. It will grow more, but blow me, there's a nubbin on that cane. Now you're going to have to look carefully. It's the little cane in between the two long ones that stops dead right in the middle of the picture now. There's a little tiny nubbin showing. So that it's either going to be a kiki or a spike, and that's not a cane I was expecting it to bloom on. So maybe we will have some blooms on this. We will see. But a big plant, that one. Yeah, grew well for me last year. Oh, you can see it better from this angle. Look. There we go. So we have signs of things happening. That's that one. Right, this one, again, not a strong plant. I don't see any signs of life at the base. This is glomeratum, and if it's going to bloom, it's probably going to be on that cane. This was last year's cane that is in effect still growing. It's still got an active growing tip on it. So, and because of its the length of those canes, you know, to accommodate it, it needs to be pendulous. So again, that one's going to get mounted shortly. I'd like to see some signs of new growth at the base, but it's been in that pot far too long. But when I start watering it, in a minute, it should perk up. Now this sad little thing is my anosmum, but it's a semi-alba version, so by definition most albas and semi-albas are not strong. I'm not happy with that on that cane. That's firm, totally firm, but I'm not sure it should go that dark in colour. But then, you know, the older canes have a darker tinge to them. There's no sign of life on... Oh, yes there is. There's a little nubbin just there on the end of my fingernail. So we may have a bloom, singular. But again, this has been in this pot far too long. It needs coming out and going on a mount. It's going to naturally hang down. It's the way it would like to grow. So sticking it up in the air like that's not the best of ideas. It hasn't dumped its root system, so it didn't mind being dry, but then it hasn't got any signs of life yet. We'll see what we can do about that. But it's a weak plant. I wasn't expecting much from it, but we'll see what we can do. And what I'd like to do is get some good new canes growing and push them on hard this year. So that's the idea. Okay, so that's really the plan, and my schedule for these is going to be to introduce them back into growth by starting watering gently, bit at a time. You know, if you've got inactive root systems and you drown the things, you may just kick them over. Actually, that may be the end of them because they'll rot. They've got to be introduced to their water gently. So these are all going to start being watered now, and those that need mounting will get done as soon as I can see some new growths coming. We'll get on with that, and as they come into growth and I see new roots, they will get watered hard, and then as those roots progress into decent root systems, hopefully, they'll get fed quite hard as well. But what they won't get this year is the bright light in their growing season, because I just don't believe they need it. Now, when we get to sort of October time, end of October into November, their food will get reduced. Now, I'm still not sure about this. If a plant lives in a deciduous forest, and all the leaves start dropping off the trees and resting in the nooks and crannies and getting tangled up in the root systems and start to rot down because of the high humidity levels and stuff like that, are they going to get any food at that time of year? I think they do. So this business of stopping the fertiliser, not sure may be that good an idea that early in the year. So I will reduce feed very gently through into November until I get into December, at which point we'll just go back down to water. But you have to bear in mind, although rainwater is quite pure, it's not devoid of nutrients. My RO water is. So I'll have a think about that when we get there. But I still think a trickle of food would be useful to the plants, up to a point. Now, my rest season started late this year. That may be the problem, that it hasn't worked as well as perhaps it should have done. I didn't start until the end of the second week of January. Well, next year the rest period is going to start a month earlier than that, about halfway through December. And then we'll have another go at it next year, and we'll see how we do. So that's the plan for the year. And as I said, my rest plan starts now at the start of the growing season. High water and food through active growing periods. Kick these on, get them fit as butcher's dogs through the growing season, and then gradually tail them off, as the shorter days come in. That's the other thing. If you have a look at the day lengths where these come from, they don't have to put up with short days like we do in the UK. Their short day lengths may only go down to about 10 hours, not 8. And their light levels, once the fog starts breaking up and things like that, their light levels would be higher for longer. It's not the UK. The UK, we're down to a couple of months of 8-hour days and lousy light levels. Whether we like it or not, that's what I've got to put up with. So that's the plan. Those are the ones that got rested. That's where they are now. And this is going to form a set. It might be a set -1. I'm really not sure about that one. There's no signs of life on that anywhere. But we'll see. Orchids do strange things, so there may be hope for it. And I'll do updates on these, once they start coming out into active growth and roots coming out all over the place, fingers crossed, we can have another look round them. But they form a set, they go together. So they're not going to get treated like other dendrobiums, like the Phalaenopsis types and my nobile types. Those are different. These are a set. That's the plans then, and my thoughts as to weather patterns and things like that, where they come from. The winter rest should involve a drop in temperature. They don't have to be frozen, you don't have to turn them into ice lollies, but they like a drop in temperature. And as that resting period progresses, towards the end of it, they should be getting pretty bright light. Well, I can only give what I've got, so that's the best I can do. And then when they start into growth again, and in this case they're going to get forced into it whether they like it or not, because it's just the time of year, that's when you start introducing a bit more water, And then as you see new roots growing and those new growths progress, you start feeding a bit more heavy. Don't suddenly go from no food to a full dose. Probably burn your roots. It's always gradual. When you're making changes to your orchids, do it gradually, a bit at a time. Increase water a little bit at a time. In the full growing season, these things will get absolutely soaked every single day. Absolutely soaked. I will be pouring water over them until they're absolutely soaked, and then they'll get it again the next day. And they'll probably get fed at every other watering. They might even get fed on 2 consecutive waterings, followed by a flush water. But they're going to get fed and watered heavy through the growing season. And quite honestly, last year, it did well. These are last year's canes with that treatment. Yeah? These are last year's canes with that treatment. You know, all of this plant, everything from there outwards, those top bits, all these are last year's new growths. It pushed on a lot. It probably grew half as big again in a single season. This one I haven't had long, so I can't comment. Yeah? This one, old canes. Yeah? That was my first cane that I grew. That's the other cane that I'm still growing because it never stopped. Yeah? This one, no comment because it's just a weak plant. I've got to get that one going if I can. I don't want to lose it, but it's just not a strong plant. It just will not get going. So we've got to work on that. And then this is the oddity that goes with them, but doesn't need to chill down in the winter. It comes from a warm area. It does get dry, and it does get brighter due to the leaves falling off the trees, but it doesn't get as cool as where the others come from. So this one's a slight exception. This one's probably going to get rested down here in the grow room, and it's not going to go up in the bedroom because it doesn't need that level of drop in temperature. So that's what we're going to do. Wish me luck. It's all good fun, isn't it? And updates will follow, of course. So I hope you follow the logic of the weather patterns and the changes that happen to these orchids in the natural world. You know, heavy rains, lower light levels. You know, if you think about it, if it's raining, what's up in the sky? Big, thick, dark clouds. Is the sun shining? Is it hell? These trees come from deciduous forest down in the trees. The light levels are low, you know, in comparison to when the sun comes out. So they don't need the high light levels in their active growing seasons. But when the deciduous trees drop their leaves, their light levels would increase a bit. In theory, if the rains are slowing down almost to a stop, the skies would probably clear. But if it leaves that fog and mist behind it, the light levels are not dramatically increasing. You've ever walked around in the fog, it's not exactly bright light. You don't need your sunshades on, do you? Yeah? So just apply that. That's what I'm going to do. Apply that logic through their next 1 year of growth. And then we'll see how we come out this time next year. All good stuff. See you again next time.